Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm finally doing it. I'm sorry that it's taken me like 2 weeks or over 2 weeks to sit down and film this. To be completely honest, I just wasn't sure if I was going to. Yes, I'm talking about Hayley Williams, the new solo debut album from the Paramore frontwoman. The album is titled Petals for Armor, and it just came out about 2 weeks ago on May 8th. And I had already reviewed the first 5 songs because originally the album was going to come out sort of in like 3 5-song chunks. And that first batch came out in February. So I already reviewed Petals for Armor Part 1, and I'll link that in the description. So, in the interest of brevity, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about those first 5 songs because I just don't want to repeat myself, and I don't have a whole lot of time at the moment. So forgive me for that. Like I said, if you want to know my thoughts on those first 5 songs, Simmer, Leave It Alone, Cinnamon, Sudden Desire, and Creepin', I'll link that review so you can check that out. I also, in that video, extensively discuss a very sort of controversial topic that was big when that section of songs came out regarding her and the Swedish alternative electronic artist named Yona Lee, also known as I Am I, Who Am I, who I adore. I've covered her stuff on this channel. Highly recommend you check her out if you have not. But there was a lot of odd, sort of uncanny comparisons, particularly with the visuals of those music videos, particularly for the music video for Cinnamon, that really seemed to be almost plagiarizing music videos and visuals that Yona Lee as I Am, Who Am I has done in the past. Now, I address all of that from sort of both sides. I try to be as unbiased as possible and dive wholly into that. So if you want to hear my thoughts more on that, check out that video that I just, said will be linked in the description, where I talk about that along with those first 5 songs. That's sort of simmered down quite a bit, so to speak, no pun intended. But that still is something that is weighing on my mind a little bit. I don't necessarily like how that whole thing was resolved. Yona Lee really kind of called her out really sort of directly, and then there was a bit of a response from Hayley, but it was a very sort of defensive, like, don't come for me kind of thing. And yeah, very passive aggressive, and then nothing really came of it. But there's still been like some odd, there's been some not so coincidental connections between the visual directors of of those music videos having followed Yona Lee as I Am I's work. And that means that they do know of each other, and they very well were influenced by the visuals and such of Yona Lee's work. And so the fact that they're denying that is pretty shady. But on the other hand, I don't know. I don't want to pick sides in this video. I want to focus solely about talking about the album. But I just feel like I did need to precursor that by saying that I still don't really know whose side to take. As a Yona Lee fan, I still am a little bit more inclined to say there's some iffy sort of direct referencing that does seem a little bit more than just coincidence, considering the sheer amount of it in these videos. If it was just 1 or 2 things, it'd be one thing, but there's just so many, it's starting to look very sus. And unfortunately, we do get a new music video that came out with the release of the album. I think it came out the day the album came out, for track 6, which is called Dead Horse. Love this song. I love Dead Horse. It's a great song. It's one of the more up-tempo songs on the record. Fans of more of the sort of up-tempo, more pop stuff of Paramore would definitely love this track. But the music video features some black boxes. It also has, Hayley dressed in this sort of fog machine black space, doing these kind of funky dance moves, which, again, normally I would not think, oh, this is directly copying Yona Lee. But compared with all the evidence that we have already of inspiration, I hate to be this person to say this, but if you watch the music video Goods by I Am I, Who Am I, there's a black box, Yona is dancing in a fog machine black environment. There are still some similarities that are a little bit too, again, just very sus for me, considering the sheer amount of, referencing that we're starting to see at this point. Um, there, isn't as egregious of a direct call out to that as some of the other music videos, but I did feel like I needed to bring that up. It was a bit unfortunate for me to watch that video and be like, oh, okay, this was obviously Warren Fu again, who was the director, visual artist director for this, and we're the creative director, so to speak. And we are again seeing possible Am I influence here that is going uncredited. And if it was just like I said, just this one video, I don't think I would have taken it very to that level. But we've already gotten a lot. So all of that aside, I do love Dead Horse. I do love the music video. The song itself, it's pretty self-explanatory. Why do I keep coming back to this guy, this fool? I sing along to the same old silly old song over and over again because I don't know any better. I'm the foolish one. And it's self-deprecating in that sort of understanding of these endless cycles of bad boyfriends or bad relationships that we find ourselves in, because they always say that, it reflects badly on you, the company that you keep. And it's like, well, give us a little bit of slack. We're trying our best here. We're only human. But I really appreciate that sentiment. And I do think it's a great, upbeat, fun song with a great, catchy melody. Something that we don't see quite so much throughout the rest of the album in that overt of a form. That's not to say that I do not enjoy this album. The remaining 10 tracks, which I have not reviewed on this channel, including Dead Horse, are a little bit all over the place for me in terms of like my appreciation for them. I definitely think there are areas in this record where things get a little bogged down for me, a little too slow or a little too repetitive. For instance, towards the end of this record, I wasn't quite as impressed with the latter half as I was with the first half. I feel like the really great sort of central songs to this record appear in more of like the first 7 or 8 tracks. And so, in the interest again of brevity, I'm not going to spend time diving into the lyrics and talking about every single song. So I do apologize. I'm more just going to kind of go through certain songs that I did want to give a shout out for and talk about my thoughts. Over Yet is a very 80s inspired, up-tempo, funky song. It's harmless to me. I find it a little bit generic in parts, and so it's definitely not one of my favorites, but I do appreciate it for what it is. This is, of course, in reference to depression and Hayley's own experience with it. And so it's a very personal, close to home burst of energy that is trying to get you to look above the cloudy darkness and resistance that you have to being positive. And at the end of the day, make it your friend. Make the darkness your friend so that you learn how to cope better with the mental situation that you find yourself in, so that you're not constantly fighting against it, because that's just so draining and it's not going to get you anywhere. If you want to try and get out of your head, you got to break a sweat. Tell yourself it ain't over yet. It's the right time to come alive. So giving yourself that mental pep talk when you're feeling at your lowest. Again, simple lyrics that I think sell themselves pretty well over the euphoric kind of 80s synth pop track that we get. And very innocent, very, very full of hope. The track Roses, Lotus, Violet, Iris. I was very intrigued by this title. We are using flowers as metaphors here for women and talking about feminism. This is one of those songs where I do really have to praise the production, because Taylor York, who is a Paramore, member, has done an amazing job with the production on this record. By the way, there is so much Radiohead influence on this record, and I didn't even fully appreciate that because I'm not the biggest Radiohead person. I played this album for my brother, and it was funny because he really enjoyed it. He's much more into sort of like alternative rock stuff. And the one song, Leave It Alone, he was like, no shade, but this is a Radiohead song. And I was like, is it? Is it actually a cover? And he was like, no, but it sounds exactly like a Radiohead song. And I was like, interesting. You can tell, Hayley talks about Radiohead as being such a huge influence on this record. You can tell that that's so much heavily kind of taking into account all of these songs and the very sort of slow, deliberate, creeping production that gets under your skin. Like there's this real visceral kind of crawling feeling about the slow percussion and micro beats that are textured all throughout. And I think it really makes this album a great sort of late night listen, especially if you're in your car. Um, I have seen your body and I have seen your beauty. They are separate things, pretty, pretty things. But I am in a garden tending to my own. So what do I care if I grow? Roses show no concern for colors of a violet. Lotuses hopes it won't spark envy in your irises. It's interesting. I don't entirely know where she's going with some of those metaphors in that part of the chorus. But it's an interesting play off of using very sort of whimsical, poetic flower imagery to allude to the iris of the eye or talk about jealousy, using violet to possibly, I assume the color violet tends to invoke a kind of feeling of passion, maybe also a feeling of jealousy. I don't know if I had to, attach a color to the emotion of jealousy or envy. Maybe violet would be that color. So I'm sort of getting the, gist that that's where those things are going. Obviously, roses, they're these blossoming, beautiful romantic symbols, but they have thorns oftentimes on their stems, which she references later on. And then, of course, with the lotus is one of the most beautiful, serene flowers that grows from muddy soil. In fact, the more mud, the better, so to speak. And so they're used often as a metaphor for, that whole phoenix from the ashes mentality. Think of all the wilted women who crane their necks to reach a window, ripping all their petals off just 'cause he loves me now, he loves me not. I myself was a wilted woman, drowsy in a dark room, forgot my roots, now watch me bloom. And that references another song on this album that I also do enjoy. And I think that, I know I'm jumping around here a little bit, but what the heck. Watch Me While I Bloom is a song, I think it's like track 12 or 13 on this album. Actually, I think it's track 14. It's track 14. That is a song that, given the, title, didn't quite, it surprised me with its element. It takes a little bit for me to get used to, but there's something so spunky about that song. And there's something so Michael Jackson about her delivery about it because it's so punctuated. And so Michael Jackson and his sort of like iconic pop songs did come to mind a little bit for me with this one, which I did think was quite interesting. And again, we're using the flower metaphors. So that is something that sort of pervades the whole concept of petals for armor and, the idea of, using the flower as a symbol, which, is kind of, it's been done before, but I appreciate the fact that Hayley kind of does it in a way that's a little murkier and seedier in parts. And that's where I sort of really kind of, like Roses, Lotus, Petals, whatever the song's called, Roses, Violet, Lotus, Iris is a pretty kind of like weighted song. It's very heavy in parts. And so I find that, juxtaposition interesting. And then, yeah, for a song like Watch Me While I Bloom, it's a bit more the opposite. It's all kind of about that bursting ecstatic energy in the springtime, when you're blossoming. Let's see. All right. So what other songs do I want to talk about? I have to talk about Why We Ever. This might be one of my favorite songs on this album. Although Leave It Alone, I would say Leave It Alone is my favorite. Why We Ever is close second. For Björk fans out there, there is something about the production of this song. There's this sort of rattling, ambient instrument sound that kind of, if you've heard the song Cocoon off of Vespertine, you might know what I'm talking about. That kind of carries a bit of the rhythm for this track, at least for the bulk of it, because 2/3 of this song are a little bit on the up-tempo side, though it's more mid-tempo, to be honest. And it's a pretty despondent song with the lyrics talking about, feeling disconnected from something you once had close to you, like a boyfriend or a friend. And now I can't seem to remember why we ever felt we had to say goodbye. Thinking, like, why did I possibly prematurely end this relationship? And there's a lot of remorse that comes through on this track. So much feeling of regret, of nostalgia for being, with people that you no longer see. And that speaks to me hugely. I also love the harmonizations in verse 2 with no more, no more, no more. That's something that's just like changes things up for me a lot that I really appreciate. And it's just so beautiful to listen to. But well, when we turn to the final bridge into the outro of this song, we have a complete tempo change up. We abruptly change to very mellow, melancholic piano chords, and Hayley's very slow, deliberate, heavy delivery. I spent the weekend at home again, drawing circles on the floor, tried to keep myself from hurting. I don't know why anymore. And then repeats, I just want to talk about it. I know I freaked you out. I'm sorry for freaking out. I just want to talk about it. And this part of the song especially speaks to me because, like I said, it feels like a real sort of bipolar moment where you remember just how much you so badly wish for things to have gone differently, and you're so caught up in like the remorse and the regret and the nostalgia of it that it weighs you to the floor. Like this part of the song, it does feel like a sudden weight has just been dropped and you're on the floor, listless, lost and confused, and full of melancholy. And that's my favorite emotion to experience, well, at least to see translated into music. It's not fun to experience, believe me, it is not fun to experience, but when it's translated into music, it's one of the most touching things for me. And so the very deliberate, emphasis on that emotion for the latter part of this track just absolutely blew me away. And it's something I really, really, really enjoy listening to, especially on a rainy afternoon while driving. There is so much emotion tied up into that. And the emphasis of, please, just can we talk about this? Like, there was so much miscommunication, and I regret so many things. And it's just so sad that things ended up being what they were. And this part of the song, it emphasizes all of those emotions so wonderfully and so tragically. So yeah, loved that moment. I do also want to talk about Crystal Clear, the closing track. I really do enjoy this song. It took me a little more time to get into it, but I think it closes out the album pretty nicely on a more kind of positive tone. I don't necessarily know if it's the most positive song on the record, but it's a song that reminds me probably the most of their last Paramore album, After Laughter, just because something about the pop delivery of it. This is about not giving into the fear, crystal clear, moving forward with clearer intention. I'm not going to give in to the fear. I'm going to, progress through my life with my head uncluttered. The breathy, I really like the octave jump there, and I really like the dynamic of that part of the song. So there's something refreshing about it, and so this song carries us out on an uplifting tone. I feel like I do need to give a shout out to Sugar on the Rim. I've seen a lot of people say that this was sort of the more kind of like, well, let me say this is definitely the most promiscuous song on the album. It's the most sexually charged, even though it still carries meaning for me. I think that it's the more playful and obviously more experimental track. It's a bit different than everything else on the record, and it's something that has a little bit more of a catchy dance quality to it that I think a lot of people are appreciating. For me personally, it's a little static, and so I don't know if I find it quite as groovy or as enlivening as others are. But in the context of the whole album, I think along with the song Creepin', there's sort of those two kind of outlier songs that have this weird sort of different kind of beat and energy and tempo, but I think it kind of makes the album more of a complete package. So, I don't really have a problem with it. It's just not one of my favorites. The other songs like Pure Love and My Friend, they're great, but I just don't really feel like I have that much more to say about them. At least sonically, they didn't stand out to me. And so overall, in forms of this record, I would say that my favorite songs would be definitely "Leave It Alone." I of course do love "Simmer," and then "Why We Ever," "Dead Horse," and probably "Over Yet." Um, oh, and probably Roses, Violet, Lotus, and Iris. That song title is really hard to say. So those would definitely be my favorites. But then, as far as the remainder of the record, it's a bit forgettable for me in parts. This isn't always necessarily my style of music. I mean, I really appreciate the lyrical content, but I do just find myself kind of like drifting away from it a little bit. Like I get kind of bored. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to the songs that really spoke to me. I really do think that this is a really powerful statement record for Hayley. It's an album that's so vulnerable and wearing its heart on its sleeve, and I appreciate that. It's not beating around the bush when talking about like mental health, talking about depression. Even in the intro to one of the songs, she says, "I'm sorry I didn't talk to you sooner. I was in a depression." Like she's just very open about that, and I really appreciate it. It comes through. There's a right level of weightedness to lightness and this mystery that kind of entwines a lot of the melody and the sort of wistful metaphors of floral imagery and overcoming and all of that. I think it's got a really great story to tell, and I'm so glad that Hayley finally had the guts to make this record, because I know that it was something that she was afraid to do for quite some time or kept putting off for years. And I think that it was very therapeutic for her, very cathartic for her. And I feel that energy. And so overall, I would say that it was a success for her. It's just not always my cup of tea in terms of some of the sonic choices and such, but to each his own. So let me know in the comments what you think about this record. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What are your favorite tracks? I'm sorry I didn't get into talking about everything, but I was looking at the time and I was on a time crunch. And so I did want to finally get this out there, though. I almost did not film this video. I was so close to it, believe me. So I'm glad I finally did. And I hope that you enjoyed it, and give it a like and subscribe if you did, and if you're new here. And like I said, check out my review of the first 5 songs, along with the whole Am I controversy, all that stuff linked in the description. And I will see you all in my next video. Peace, love, and light. Bye.